Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We have a story here which we touched on yesterday, but day before yesterday actually, wasn't it? It was Tuesday. We touched on this Tuesday, but I just want to do a follow-up because there is a follow-up. This is Humza Yousaf who got Gregor Smith to try and find a workaround so that he didn't have to wear his mask all the time. Obviously, they brought the rules in, everyone's got to wear their mask. But they, of course, are the elites and they don't have to. There has to be a way for him not to wear the mask and yet keep within the rules that they've created. He said he didn't even understand his own rules. He was health secretary, for God's sake. He helped draft them, and yet wearing a mask was too complex for him. And so Gregor Smith gave him a few hints and tips and ways to get around and beat the rules. The rest of us, well, we all had to obey them, of course. We'd have been told off otherwise. But we aren't the ruling elite, are we? We're just the plebs. We're just the masses, the serfs. We'll do as we're told and we'll be thankful for it. Well, it's come back and it's bitten him. Because now there's a woman who lost both her husband and her mother due to COVID. And she's really laid into him for what can only really be described as arrogant hypocrisy. But then they are all arrogant and they are all hypocrites. So bang on. Let's take a look. What's truly galling about this is that they do have this air of arrogance about them. They do have this thing where they do as I say, not as I do. And they're quite blatant about it. They don't even attempt to pretend to hide it. They just do it, say, yes, it's all very well, but I'm important and I can't have this. You must get on, it's for your benefit. But being as important as I am and up my own arse so much, I'm free to ignore all these rules. This is why people have had enough. This is why this kind of thing won't happen again. And you see the WHO are already planning for the next pandemic. I wonder when they'll release it. Because it certainly seems to be that way. How can they possibly... They're working on vaccines. How can they possibly be working on vaccines for the next pandemic when nobody knows what it is? Do they take us for fools? Anyway, that's a separate video. Humza Yousaf's COVID workaround excuse dismantled by a woman who lost her husband and mum during pandemic. The National Clinical Director told the then Health Secretary to keep a drink in his hand at all times to avoid having to wear a face covering, angering those who lost loved ones. Because, of course, he's better than that. Oh, yes, we've got lots of loopholes for wankers like you. You can get away with it. You don't have to put these masks on. Turns out these masks are actually useless. They're not PPE masks. The evidence has come in subsequently that because they're not PPE, they were unsuitable. And indeed, by the constant breathing in and out and having that constant dampness there, could actually be a health risk. And then, of course, there's the environmental risk, because you only have to cast your mind back 2 years or so, 3 years, and these things were littering the streets everywhere. It was the crisp packet of the 2009, late 2000 teens, wasn't it? The early 20s. They were everywhere. They were just hanging around. I mean, people just throw them out there all the time. Disgusting. And they didn't rot. They were horrible things. And yet you had to wear them because rules. And yet, pointless. Absolutely pointless. And even their own scientists told them they were pointless. But it wasn't for safety. This wasn't for safety. This was two things. One, compliance. Make sure the sheep do what they're told. And secondly, of course, it was to be different. To push it. Let's show how Scotland's mammy can look after her wee bairns. Well, Scotland's mammy is going to get her own uppance one day. Anyway, Humza Yousaf's excuse for asking advice on his own COVID rules, the ones he helped draft and he didn't understand, has been dismantled by a woman who lost her husband and mother during the pandemic. It emerged on Tuesday that the First Minister had quizzed National Clinical Director Jason Leach on whether he had to wear a mask at a dinner when he was Health Secretary. And like I say, we've covered this particular story, so we won't be going into that too much. So we will come round. That's when Leach told him. I said Gregor Smith, didn't I? No, it's Jason Leach. I apologise. I'm confusing the wankers. There's so many of them, you forget which one's which. Anyway, asked about the incident, a spokesman for Mr Yousaf said this exchange simply shows that the then Health Secretary seeking specific up-to-date guidance from a senior advisor. In other words, asking the senior advisor about the rules that he helped to draft. Because... you know, it's hard remembering things when you're very stupid, isn't it? Yes, let's put this. I have to wear a mask. When can you not wear a mask? When I'm alone, in a private place, or eating, or playing the euphonium. wonderful image, sorry, tangent time, wonderful image of a band, and they had the brass players, and they were wearing their masks because they had to wear masks. The law was you had to wear masks, but they have to blow through the instruments. So they cut a hole in the mask. But they were being compliant. Look, I'm compliant. Because sheep, meh, putting the mask on, cutting a hole in the mask so you can blow through your instrument. It was the stupidest thing I ever saw. And even today, and you still see it, people in a car, windows up, driving along, on their own, wearing a mask. Even to this day. What have they done to these poor people? Mentally knackered them, haven't they? Anyway, we'll get back to this. Margaret Walton, part of the Scottish bereaved group, COVID bereaved group, was unimpressed with the incident and rubbished the excuse given by both parties. Speaking to BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland show, she said, "The current First Minister may be able to say I was checking that out, but the content of those messages that we saw yesterday would suggest to me that a workaround was being provided for the First Minister of how he could get away around the guidance, and being provided this by the National Clinical Director because he is better than us." The arrogance of these people that they think they can do this. Miss Waterton went on to say that her late mum had watched every briefing given by the Scottish Government during COVID and had stuck to the guidelines. She said her late husband would poke fun at her for being the COVID police because she was so busy all the time making sure people were reading their mask properly, reading the rules properly, or wearing their mask properly, distancing properly, because I believe that was important for every citizen in Scotland to play their part. She said, and here we have that situation that was brought before us yesterday, and it smacks to me of workaround. During the interview, Mr Waterton said she had lost faith with the entire Scottish Government organisation since revelations about deleted WhatsApp messages emerged last week. And that is a grievance for a lot of people. And I personally know, 2 SNP, and they weren't rabid. They weren't rabid SNP supporters. They were pro-independence, and I can respect a pro-independence view. I don't have a problem with a political viewpoint. I'm not an arse. Unless it's a really extreme one. But, generally I can respect that. And I know these people, and outside of that particular thing, get on very well with them. One of them was a bit rabidly SNP. The other one just voted SNP because he wanted independence. Neither of them will ever vote SNP again. And both of them say it's the same thing. It was the deletion of those messages meant they were lying to us. And if they're lying to us about that, what else are they lying to you about? And that was it. And that's 2 fairly hardcore SNP supporters who will never vote for the SNP again. I don't think they're alone. I honestly think that what Margaret there is saying is going to be widespread. People have had enough. They've realised that the lies are there and that this government was not protecting them. It was doing anything other than protecting them. It was protecting itself. And now the revelations now about trying to find workarounds and loopholes so that we don't have to obey the rules that we are forcing onto others is also going to come around and bite them. And bite them hard, I hope. She said, what I think the evidence is demonstrating is that there was no clear application of policy within the Scottish Government and its officers, and their absolute priority seems to be determining that they wouldn't leave anything behind that was discoverable under the freedom of information. And that, of course, she's got it nailed to a tree. They don't want to leave anything. It is scorched earth. They are burning, destroying, shredding every bit of evidence because they know that the evidence there is utterly destructive, both to them personally, to the party, to the cause of independence, everything. They know it would destroy them. And so they have to hide the evidence. And that, of course, is exactly what they're doing. But the hiding of the evidence, the shadiness, that in itself is evidence. That destruction of evidence is in itself the evidence that these people were up to no good. Because if what they were doing was right and virtuous and true, they'd be only too keen to publish it, to say, look how good we were, look what we were trying to do. Sure, we got some things wrong. We'd never been in this position before. And if that was the case, and if they'd done things, and if it had been done in the light of trying their very best, people will forgive the mistakes. People are forgiving. If it's seen that these people were doing their absolute very best under very difficult circumstances, and there were a few mistakes made, then you can forgive the mistakes. We didn't intend it to happen. We didn't know this would happen. It's unfortunate. We promised that we will learn from this, blah, 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 and all that usual bollocks. But that isn't what's happening. It's destroy everything, burn everything, shred everything. We must admit to nothing. Which tells you far, far more by its lack of evidence than by any evidence that could be presented. Anyway, she went on. She said, as far as we can determine, the UK inquiry has had to really struggle and really force the Scottish Government to provide information and evidence for it. This is a situation of the Scottish Government's own making. And it's, yeah, she's right. And this woman, Margaret, is absolutely bang on that these people are arrogant, hypocritical. They're looking for the rules that they can break. They pretend not to know the rules that they drafted in order to find these loopholes. Meanwhile, they put in the COVID police out. You can be prosecuted for doing things. People were taken to court and all sorts of things and fined for the very rules that they were quite happy to break because these arrogant pricks didn't like wearing the mask, didn't like following the rules because the rules were inconvenient. Coming up. Just as an aside, but very similarly related, I don't know if you can cast your mind back a couple of years, and they had this big summit in Europe over the COVID and that, and they were all talking away and that, and somebody actually filmed it, and it was like, oh, okay, we're going to do the photographs now, and everyone moved onto the podium, pulled their masks out, took their photographs, they're all standing apart, they all took their photographs, marvellous, look at us, okay, thank you very much, and then they all took their masks off and then huddled in a group. Wankers. Anyway, Hamza Yousaf, you arrogant prick, don't be looking for any sympathy from these quarters. I am sure that many people on the forums below will write and tell me exactly what they think about this arrogant, hypocritical bunch of complete and utter wankers that destroyed and are still destroying Scotland over this. Their secrecy, their snidiness, their sleekedness, the whole damn rot. They all need to be tried, convicted and jailed. I would actually bring back the rope, but I don't have that power. Anyway, till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.